Hello and welcome back to my channel. This video is about principles of bookkeeping controls, and today I'm going to talk about correcting errors, clearing suspense accounts, and redrafting trial balance. Let's start with correcting errors and clearing suspense accounts. Correcting errors is one of the purposes of the journal, and most errors that I have discussed in the previous video, which I will put the link down below, would need journal entry to be corrected. Let's go back to the trial balance that I have showed you in my previous video as well. This trial balance was not balanced, and we have inserted a suspense account to make it balance. Next, we will take a look at the errors that exist in this trial balance, and we will create journal entries to correct them. And after correcting all the errors, this trial balance should be balanced and the suspense account balance should be zero out. So we have 5 errors. The first error is rent of 150 has been debited to the electricity expense. This error is an example of error of commission, because rent and electricity are of the same type of account, which is an expense account, and they both go to debit. So this error is not disclosed by the trial balance. In correcting errors, we have to follow 3 steps. Step 1. Identify what is the incorrect entry and the suspense amount. Step 2. Identify what should be the correct entry. And step 3, make the correction entry. So step 1 is incorrect entry. Step 2 is correct entry. And step 3 is correction entry. Then let's enter the account here and debit and credit. Then let's enter the incorrect entry. This is the entry that has been done, which is incorrect. So we have entered the electricity in debit instead of rent account, and there was nothing mentioned about the credit entry, so it means it's correct. It could either be bank if it was paid or PLCA if not yet paid. Next, let's enter the correct entry. This is the entry that should have been done. So let's enter rent in debit, and then for the credit entry, it's correct, so there is no change. Now let's make the correction entry. The correction entry is the journal entry to correct the errors, so we will transfer them here. Let's compare the incorrect to the correct entry. First, electricity 150 in debit is not in the correct entry, so it means it's incorrect, and we have to remove it, so we will put it here in the correction. We have to remove this amount in debit, so we will put the same amount in credit. So this 150 credit in electricity will cancel the 150 debit in electricity. Next, the bank or the PLCA are just the same, so it means it's correct, so we will not include it in the correction. Let's cross out what we have sorted so far. Next, rent is a correct entry, but it's not done, so let's enter rent in the correction. Then let's double check the double entry if it's balanced or equal on both sides. And it is, so this will be the journal entry to correct the first error. So let's copy it here to our journal. Next, let's go to our second error. Payment for telephone of 36 was correctly recorded in the cash book, but recorded as 63 in the telephone account. This is an example of transposition error wherein the digits are mixed up or interchanged. Let's follow the same steps. First, let's identify the incorrect entry. It says 36 was correctly recorded in the cash book, so let's enter bank and credit 36. It means we already paid the telephone expense, that's why it's recorded into our cash book, therefore credit in our bank. And then in the telephone expense account, we recorded it as 63. We can see that the double entry is not equal, so a suspense account was automatically inserted to make them equal. The amount of the suspense is the difference of these two, so 27 was inserted to make both the totals equal. If you are wondering what is this amount in suspense account and why is it here, let's go back to the trial balance earlier. And this is that amount in the suspense account. But why is it 123 in debit, but in our suspense is just 27 in credit? It's because as we go along with the remaining errors, we will discover more suspense amounts like that. And when we combine all the suspense amounts, the total would be this amount. Next, let's identify the correct entry. It says 36 was correctly recorded in the cash book, so it means the bank entry is correct. So it means the telephone should be 36 as well. Now let's make the correction entry. Let's compare the incorrect to the correct entry. First, the bank account is the same, so it means it's correct, so we won't put it in our correction entry. Next, telephone is incorrect because we recorded 63 instead of 36, so we will put it here in the correction. We recorded a much higher amount than the original amount, so this 27 should not be here, so we have to remove it by entering this amount to the opposite side, which is credit. This will reduce the balance of the telephone 63 in debit into 36. Next is the suspense account. The suspense account should be cleared, so we will put it here in the correction. And we have 27 in credit, so we will remove it by putting 27 in debit. And we're done with all the corrections, so let's check if the double entry is equal. And it is, so let's copy this to our journal. Next, let's go to the third error. The net column of the sales daybook has been overcasted by 50. This is an example of casting error wherein the columns of the daybooks were totaled incorrectly. So let's follow the same steps. Let's identify the incorrect entry. Remember that sales daybook columns are transferred to RLCA, VAT, and sales account. But nothing mentioned about the RLCA, so it means it's correct, but we don't know the amount of the RLCA, so let's just put X in debit. Same for the VAT, let's just put X in credit. For the sales account, we don't know the original amount as well, so let's put X in credit. All we know is that it was overcasted by 50, so it means we recorded 50 more to sales. And since the credit column is 50 more than the debit column, a suspense account was automatically inserted to make them equal. Next, let's enter the correct entry. There are no amounts given in these accounts, but we know that they are correct, so let's just put X. Now let's make the correction entry. Let's compare the incorrect entry to the correct entry. We can see that these three here, RLCA, VAT, and sales, are the same, so it means they are correct, so we won't put them in our correction. Next, this amount in sales here is not supposed to be here and should be removed. So let's put it in our correction entry. To remove this amount in credit, we have to enter the same amount to the opposite side, which is debit. So this 50 debit in sales will cancel this 50 in credit. Next, let's clear the suspense amount. We have 50 in debit. So to remove it, let's put 50 in credit. Now we're done with all the correction. So let's check if the double entry is equal, and it is equal. So let's copy this to our journal. Next, let's go to the fourth error, drawings of 100 recorded in the cash book only. This is an example of single entry wherein we only recorded to one side, which in this case is credit. Let's follow the same steps. First, let's identify the incorrect entry. It says here that 100 was recorded in the cash book only, therefore it was recorded in the bank. So let's put 100 in credit. And that's the only entry, and we can see that the double entry is not equal. So the suspense account was automatically inserted to make it equal. Next, let's identify the correct entry. The correct entry here should be the bank 100 in credit and drawings 100 in debit. Now let's make the correction entry. Let's compare the incorrect to the correct entry. So the banks are the same, so it means it's correct, so we won't put it in the correction. Next, we can see that the drawings is a correct entry, but it wasn't entered, so we will enter it in the correction. Let's enter 100 in debit. Now let's clear the suspense amount. We have 100 in debit. To remove it, let's put 100 in credit. We're done with all the corrections, so let's check if the double entry is equal. And it is equal, so let's copy this to our journal. Next, let's move on to our last error. Office equipment of 550 was debited to office expenses. This is an example of error of principle wherein these two accounts are of different type of account. The office equipment is an asset and the office expenses is an expense account. So let's follow the same steps. Let's identify the incorrect entry. The office equipment 550 was debited to office expenses. And then there is nothing mentioned about the opposite entry, so let's assume it's either bank or PLCA. It's because if it is paid, it's credit in the bank, and if it is not paid, it is credit in the PLCA. We can see that the double entry is equal, so there is no suspense account inserted. Next, let's identify the correct entry. It's supposed to be office equipment 550 in debit and the same for the credit, bank or PLCA. Now let's make the correction entry. Let's compare the incorrect to the correct entry. The bank or PLCA are the same, so it means it's correct, so we won't put it in the correction. Next, the office expenses is not supposed to be here and it should be removed, so let's put it in our correction. To remove this amount in debit, we have to enter the same amount to credit. So this 550 credit in office expenses will cancel this 550 in debit. And then the office equipment is the correct entry, but it's not entered, so we will enter it in the correction. Now we're done with all the corrections, so let's check if the double entry is equal, and it is, so let's copy this to our journal. So we're done with all the errors and we have completed all the journal entries to correct the errors. Next, let's move on to redrafting the trial balance. This is the trial balance that I have shown you earlier, where we inserted the suspense account, 123. Now that we have these journal entries to correct the errors, we will adjust the balances of these accounts and clear the suspense account. First is the electricity, 150 in credit, so this will reduce our electricity in debit. Next is rent, 150 in debit, so this will increase our rent in debit. Next, telephone, 27 in credit, so this will decrease our telephone in debit. Next, the suspense account, 27 in debit, so let's enter this to our suspense account, 27. For the details, let's enter the opposite account, which is telephone. Next, sales, 50 in debit, so this will decrease our sales in credit. Next, suspense, 50 in credit, so let's enter this to our suspense account, 50. For the details, it's the opposite account, which is sales. Next, drawings, 100 in debit, so this will increase our drawings in debit. Next, suspense, 100 in credit, so let's enter this to our suspense account, 100. For the details, the opposite account, which is drawings. Next, office expenses, 550 in credit, so this will reduce our office expenses in debit. And the last, office equipment, 550 in debit, so this will increase our office equipment in debit. Next, let's balance the suspense account. And we can see now that the totals are equal. It means the balance is now cleared. So we will remove this amount in our trial balance. So after correcting all the errors and clearing the suspense account, our trial balance is now balanced. And that's it for today's video. I know this topic is not very easy, so if you have some questions, please comment down below. For our next video, our topic will be payroll. So if you want to watch more videos like this, please don't forget to give us a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel. Thank you for watching.